So, do you have some reference that how your parents raised you and the environment you were in has really shaped your leadership style?
Without question. Um, and I actually go first to my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up living in a house next door to my grandmother's house. So my grandmother, my father's mother, was a very strong influence. And my grandfather had passed away when I was 4, so I don't really remember him.
Mm-hmm.
But my whole life, I, in retrospect, I say that she was the matriarch of the family, right?
Right.
And there was, there were certain just lessons that you were taught, and norms that were acceptable. And part of those norms were giving back and kindness to others, and right, just being grateful for what you had, regardless of kind of where you found yourself. Um, I did not grow up in an affluent family, in a family that I would say had tremendous success professionally. I grew up in a hardworking family
Right.
who valued hard work and who believed that they wanted better for the next generation, right? So, so for me, absolutely, between my grandmother, both of my parents, and yes, the siblings were exactly as you described them. Um, but to me, that too kind of shapes you in a way, because it either makes you tougher and more resilient, but all things then, right, have an impact on you. But
Right.
certainly family, and I can talk beyond that, I'll let you ask the questions. But certainly starting with family, I would say, family and faith to an extent, right? That part of giving back and those cultural things were taught very, very early on in my life.
So, what do you think? What is the main value, the major value that brings you to this place to be a leader, to be a good leader, and running a big department?
Yeah, for me personally, I mean, I would say, you know, a tremendous sense of gratitude,
Right.
a tremendous sense of giving back, paying it forward, however you want to categorize that. Um, and you know, those are definitely the first things that pop in my mind. But wanting to make sure that all the support I was given, I give back,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that, you know, when I talk about my own leadership style, I talk about things like team, not staff,
Right.
right? I don't talk about my staff. That we are a team. And I talk about the need to make sure that people are given a voice to
Mhm.
contribute to the organization. Not everybody comes with the same knowledge and the same, right? But to give people the chance to really be part of the dialogue, I believe to be very important from a
Mhm.
leadership standpoint.
Right.
And um, again, your first comment was about my office. When I walked into the office for the first time, my predecessor had his desk in that back corner. That's where his desk was.
Right. I would say not a
And I
right place.
didn't like it because I
Mhm.
didn't like that I was hidden. Because even being down in this suite, it's called the executive suite, it has a stigma. So putting my desk right here initially until last week. So when I walked in this morning, I saw it for the first time. But my desk was here because I wanted to be by the door,
Right.
right? And even this is even more so when the door's open. I'm fully accessible, right?
Right.
And to me, all of that ties together in terms of how one views themselves, how your leadership style works, and to really make yourself available to the people around you.
So from available, uh, I read a book about a decade ago, 1 Minute Manager,
I have it on the shelf right over there.
and I ordered a new copy because the industries and organizations are changed, and it's on my table. I have not read it again yet. I was totally sold to the idea that the leader should be available, right? But even in my organization where I work, people are not available. So, how you make it possible
Yeah.
to be available whenever your team needs you?
Well, see, to me, well, we're in a different cultural society, right? So to me, it's how we make ourselves available. Because I can't always be present and available because I have other commitments.
Yeah.
But when I am around, the more my door can be open, the better. And sometimes it can't because I'm in meetings.
Yeah.
The more I can walk around the building, the more I can show up at events and activities, even if it's not for 2 hours, but to stop by for 10 or 15 minutes and to be present.
Mm-hmm.
The other availability for my team and for the organization, I think, is being responsive to email, picking up the phone call and having a conversation with a colleague, not always delaying people, knowing that people wait on you, right? And that in leadership comes responsibility. And the longer you take to create a dialogue, the more stagnant your organization can become because it doesn't allow for the ebb and flow to take place when you're holding up the dialogue. So I, as I said earlier, I put things on my calendar like walk around the building. I try to get out and about. I try to be as visible as I can, knowing it's not as much as I would like it.
Right.
But always trying to make sure that that availability is prioritized.
Right. Uh, for how long you are in this role in this foundation?
So I've been in this role, I'm in my 4th year. I've completed 3 and I'm now in my 4th year in the role here at UConn Foundation. Previously was in a role at a different university for 10 years.
Oh.
And for the last 4 years as the number 2 guy, the vice president, not the senior vice president,
Right.
at Emory University in Atlanta. So,
Okay. So the type of organization, I believe there should not be much politics in your team members, but there is always everybody want to be above, everybody want to succeed, grow, promote, get promotion. So there is a competition,
Sure.
right, between different people. And sometimes politics jumps into one staff or to other staff, and it's difficult to catch that instinct. If some staff is showing some political agenda and manipulating things so he or she can get better off and at the expense of other colleagues or maybe at the expense of the department, the organization. So have you came across some problem here or in your previous organization?
Sure. I mean, I would say, politics and organizations, it's human nature in some regard. We're competitive people, right? And I think, not everyone intrinsically wants to do a good job, but hopefully most people do. That's a hard one. I think from a leadership standpoint, what I do, I try to identify, I shouldn't say it that way. I try to identify people at every stage in the organization, right?
Right.
There are people who are 100% with us. There are people who aren't. There are people who are rowing in the same direction. There are people who are rowing against, right? And within all of that creates politics. And for me, what I try to do is identify both people who are maybe without the notion of political gain, doing the best job, and seeking them out, right? But I also try to find those who are maybe more politically motivated. And again, you can encourage and discourage, right? I mean, I encourage strong performance. I discourage political gain. And yet there are times people are being political because their maybe performance is lacking. And they right.
They want to cover up.
And I think candor is very important from a leadership standpoint. I, every day on the way to work, I check and this morning was no exception. As I stopped for coffee and continued my drive here, I live at Hartford, and there's a conversation I will have today about a situation that I've become aware of that I think needs to be addressed. And the more candid I can be, as challenging as that is at times in leadership, the better, more healthier organization I think I create. Because I think those, the political posturing has to be addressed as candidly as anything that we do as leaders. And not that it has to be called out, but it has to be acknowledged, especially when it becomes detrimental.
Right. So most of the time, even people don't distinguish between manager and a leader. And every manager have a percentage of leadership, and every leader have some percentage of management. Being you in this position, what do you think your time you are spending on your job? How much time you would be spending like in management?
Yep. I think this is a central question of our time. And I think of our time being the always on generation, right? Email has us working 24/7. It's on our nightstands. It's probably the last thing we touch and the first thing we touch.
Yeah.
There's this constancy, at least for me, to what I do, right? And yet I say in leadership, not in management, management to an extent. So I say, if you're a line worker, if you're in the organization doing your job, you probably should be spending the majority of your time doing.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Doing. If you're a manager, you probably are 50% doing and 50% leading.
Yeah.
And in leadership, I should be, one could argue, the president of the university should be, one could argue, 80% leading, strategy, thinking about the future and where we're headed and how we're going to get there, and 20% doing. And I would argue that most of us are the reverse. That if I get 20% of my time clear from other distraction, from the need to do, to actually think and lead, it's a good day.
Yeah.
Because the doing gets in the way, or takes precedent, or becomes the focus. And I find the more I can begin to push out the doing so that I can lead, again, I never regret the decision.
Right.
I never regret the decision.
One question that pops into my mind many times is, they say the number of decisions you make, the more you make, your brain become, it decision muscles grow, and you can actually make more decisions and better decisions. But on the other side, we have the science that also tells us the more decisions you make in a day, your capacity gets reduced by the end. And I don't know if it is true or not, but we heard that President Obama, he wears only two color of soap. So he don't have to choose which one I have to wear. So lessen the amount of decision in the early morning, that which color he has to wear. He has only two.
Only two.
Yeah. This I heard, it's not confirmed. So how do you prioritize your decision making so it does not get into the bigger
Well,
things.
I think you hit, again, I think you're getting to the point. Do those around me bring me options or problems?
Right.
Because again, I think oftentimes we are taught to say, I've identified the issue, or I think this needs to be different. Not every person comes with the solution.
Right.
And I think the first thing as a leader that you have to teach your people that bringing options, how many ever you bring, is part of leadership at their level, because I can't create every path forward, right?
Right.
And I need options to pick from. And that's an interesting question about the more decisions you make, right? I talk about creating work for ourselves, that we create a continuous loop by the more quickly I respond, the more quickly the other person feels they need to respond
Right.
to the leader. And I end up in 4 or 5 emails that could have been 2 or 1 quick conversation had we been face to face.
Right.
So I do look for opportunities to have dialogue versus communication via email or other ways, because I find we often get to better solutions
Right.
and even more quickly. But I find it an interesting question you're asking. Should those in leadership limit the options brought forward?
Yeah.
And, I think in most cases, I'm presented limited options, but there are other cases where no one comes with the option. Because as the leader, they wait to hear what I say. And I'm going, if you would have come with 2 options, I would have responded. Instead, I'm having to talk through multiple paths because you're waiting for me rather than me responding to you.
Right.
Does that make?
Yeah, it's really makes sense. So I have some written down questions, so I would
Yes.
come to them. So one question is, we said someone is successful, and I would say you are successful. But how personally you define success for yourself or for any other person?
Whew. Without question, I am tremendously grateful for the opportunities I've been given, and for the people along my path who've helped me, right? And I'm always mindful of them, and we can talk about that in a second. If you notice a bookshelf behind me full of turtles, I talk about the people who've helped me, but without question, I am grateful for the success I've had, and I feel successful. And yet every day is a challenge as a leader, because I'm now in my 4th year, as I said earlier. This organization is fundamentally different today than it was when I arrived 4 years ago.
Right.
And yet there are people around me who say, are you ever satisfied? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, you've had such tremendous success since you've arrived over the last 4 years. And yet you always seem discontent, right? And I said, well, I'm very grateful for what we've accomplished together as a team, right? The last 4 years, 3.5 years. And yet as the leader, I'm looking forward. The old adage, don't spend much time in the side or rearview mirror, keep looking straight ahead. So I still see the things that are opportunities in front of us. So, and again, that's an interesting dynamic in leadership. Does one feel content and successful along the way? Or does one, as a leader, always feel that they're leading forward? That they're looking, because I'm very grateful for, again, the success I've had, both professionally over my career and here at this organization. And yet, every day I come in thinking about how to take us to the next level. And it's always at the front of my mind, not at the back, is how to continue to move us forward.
So, how how you see the opportunities? For example, in this organization, you are raising funds. So, do you say there can be different ideas to raise fund, and you have introduced new ways to raise funds, or you have increased the reach to people who fund? So how you move forward?
Yes. So both, but let me say it a different way. So yes, there are different ways to approach fundraising, and I'm bringing some of those new ideas to the table. I think our industry, the nonprofit philanthropic sector, has become a little outdated in terms of how we do certain things. And I think the for-profit sector is showing us some technologies and ways to shift and think differently about what we do. So that's a piece of it. Two, maybe the greatest success I've felt here at this organization is for those people who are donors already. We had to fundamentally change our relationship with those people.
Right.
Less transactional, more relationship based, and we had to bring them closer to the organization. So I feel very proud of having shifted the relationship and really created a different culture within our donor population, which has also been successful at bringing new donors to the table, right?
Right.
And then at the end of the day, it's not just raising money, but we have 241,000 alumni. And I want all of those alumni to begin to feel more connected to their university. So there's multiple measurements for me about, have we deepened the relationship with our most generous donors? Are we building relationships with new donors that are bringing new people to the table? And are we creating long-term future relationships that will yield, at some point when I may not even be here, new gifts because of a continuum of engagement. So I feel like in many ways I've shifted a culture that has been about all of those things: new ideas, changing relationships, and building new ones.
So actually what happened in many organizations, we have already a relationship, then we take it as granted. Oh, this guy always give that much money every month or every year. Why waste time?
And I believe the word stewardship of those people is as important as bringing the new donor in. And they will tell you, I mean, donors that I met with when I first came said that they felt their relationship was very transactional.
Yeah.
And that they didn't feel the connection, these are their words, to the organization that they wish they had. So I have been very focused on building those relationships, making those connections in very individualized, meaningful ways for each person, which is different in many cases, because what you would enjoy as a donor or that person may be very different. And our job is to build a relationship with you, to understand your interest, and to build that connection in a way that really changes the relationship.
Business is relationship.
Business is
is
relationship.
sales and marketing, and sales and marketing is part of relationship. So, just out of curiosity, it's not related to my interview, but
Yep.
can you give me one example how you engage them? One example how you make one person engaged with the organization who is a donor.
Yeah, sure. I had a donor who was not only a donor, but a former board member of the foundation who had drifted away. No one had kept in touch with them. They had not been engaged in ways that they felt were meaningful, and they had moved on to other things in their life and career, and began to build other connections with other things they cared about.
Right.
And I reached out to that person because they were a former board member and a significant donor, and I began a conversation. And I began building a relationship. And through that relationship, I learned about the person, I learned about their family, I learned about why they were involved with the organization in the first place. I learned why they became disconnected, right? And I continued to see this person. Now, along the path, this person says to me, your colleague from another university, senior person, where I went to undergraduate, because they actually went to graduate school here at
Right.
UConn, has been to visit me. And in the very first visit, asked me for a gift. And I didn't say anything. And he looked at me and he said, you've yet to ask me for a gift. I know you want me to support UConn. He said, but you're taking the time to understand who I am and what it is I'm interested in and to reconnect me. And he says, and you've done it, right?
Right.
So I took that conversation over a period of 2 years.
Oh.
2 years. And I translated what they had made clear was interesting to them. And I took what we needed as a university and connected it. And I began saying, would you be interested in talking about the next step towards maybe supporting
Right.
this thing? Wow. Because I didn't take him exactly where he thought I was. And he went, that's really interesting. I would love to talk to my wife about that. I would love for you to come back and visit with us again. And 2.5 years later, we announced $1 million gift that doubled, more than doubled